What if the weakest son in the family was actually the strongest man alive, hiding in plain sight? Tonight, you're about to watch him prove it, one broken bone at a time. The Steel Guard training ground had never seen a morning like this one. The youngest son of the patriarch had just finished a brutal session with a knight named Raphael, and the captain standing nearby could not process what he was looking at. This was the same kid who used to fake injuries just to skip warm-ups. The spoiled brat, the family embarrassment, the punchline of every joke on this estate. So when he picked up a sword and settled into a proper stance, the knights nearby could barely hold back their laughter, but laughter never got the chance to finish. The captain ordered the sparring partner to go easy, left hand only, no mana, because surely the young master could not survive a real fight. That single sentence hit something deep inside him. His pride took the insult like a blade to the ribs. He told the knight to come at him with everything he had. Then he screamed the word begin, and the world seemed to blur around him. The first strike nearly took the knight's head clean off. Onlookers froze, completely unable to make sense of what they were seeing. The knight barely managed to block, got forced backward, and started to panic. This was supposed to be the pampered rich boy nobody respected. So why was a trained knight the one struggling to survive? An explosion of raw aura tore through the middle of the arena, and the knight dropped to the ground. The boy just stood there, calm, and asked if he had won. The training ground that had been laughing minutes ago went dead silent. Everyone was asking the same question in their heads. How was any of this possible? This boy's name was Aaron, and in this life, he had made himself a promise to be merciless. Because his last life had been nothing but suffering. In his first life, he had absolutely no talent. His grandfather and father were legendary knights. Yet Aaron himself could barely scrape by as a third-class fighter. Everyone mocked him for it, and honestly, they had a point. He really was seen as useless, a stain on a proud bloodline. The only thing of real value he ever owned was something called the Interdimensional Transaction Book. It let him trade across different worlds, and we will get into exactly how that worked very soon. The moment he decided to use it and finally become someone respectable, his own brother sent killers after him. They stole the book, and then they tortured him for hours, healing him with potions just to keep the pain going longer, all because his brother wanted him to suffer as much as humanly possible before the end. But there was one item the killers never found, a small bookmark he had once bought through the trading book, the bookmark of wishes. As everything faded to black, it activated, and that is the exact moment he woke up in the past. At first, confusion, his old room, his old maid, nothing making sense yet. Then he noticed his eyes were glowing with strange blue fire. Somehow, without holding the physical book at all, he could now see the entire trading system in his mind. A notification appeared, asking if he wanted to log in, with only one option, confirm. No cancel button anywhere. He stared at it, thought this was suspicious as hell, and hit confirm anyway. The system loaded and revealed something strange. 10 coins already sitting in his account. His level had not carried over from his past life. So where did these come from? He shrugged it off and decided to test the waters. A chest of coins appeared before him, and this time, he swore to himself he would not get played like a fool again. He pulled up the exchange rates, watched glowing scales appear, and a fresh notification announced 30 coins total. More than he expected. And that is when the real value of the system finally clicked for him. Prices fluctuated across worlds, and the strategy was obvious: buy low, sell high. But taxes, commissions, and level restrictions made this a brutal chicken and egg problem. He needed results to level up, but he needed to level up to get good results. Then a seller named Hearthstone popped up, hawking mana stones, his name glowing red with warning. Aaron checked the man's profile and realized he had been scamming buyers for years without consequence. He confronted Hearthstone directly, threatened to report the fraud, and watched the scammer panic in real time. Turns out Hearthstone was running slave labor in his mines, and desperately did not want that exposed. The man folded fast, cutting his price in half. The deal went through, but only 22.5 coins were deducted instead of 25. A cashback effect kicked in and Aaron froze, wondering if he had somehow unlocked VIP status. He shook the thought off immediately. That kind of privilege was far too rare to land on accident. With mana stones secured, he began training his family's breathing technique, one that demanded both a strong body and heavy mana reserves. Back in the present, he was trying to enjoy his victory, striking poses. But nobody in the crowd was buying it. They assumed the fight had been staged. Stung by the disbelief, he challenged another knight, a man named 𝗪𝗿, to a bare-knuckle match. Before objections could even form, a girl stepped forward, Karen, the eldest daughter of the family, and pushed the fight through anyway. The captain panicked internally. This knight fought like a rank above his actual level, with reach that made him nearly untouchable. There was no way the young master stood a chance. Except Aaron rushed straight in, and the fight turned into a one-sided beating within seconds. The crowd erupted, chanting his name while he stood there completely unbothered. Karen walked up, touched his face, and apologized for ever underestimating him. She told him how proud she was. See, Karen herself was a monster in combat, talented enough to master the family's sacred breathing technique if the rules allowed women to learn it. Their father genuinely mourned that fact, knowing his daughter was the most gifted child he had. But tradition locked her out completely. That never stopped her from becoming a badass in her own right. And when she saw Aaron putting in real exhausting work, she understood the effort on a level nobody else in the family could. She apologized for judging him like everyone else had, and Aaron felt something twist in his chest. Because the truth was, he had trained this hard specifically to earn her approval. Out of every sibling he had, Karen was the only one who never treated him like garbage. He had planned this whole thing just to get her to notice him first. And as dinner approached that night, he had absolutely no idea how quickly his family was about to test his patience. At the dinner table, their father praised the food, and Karen mentioned she had the kitchen go all out, since Aaron was leaving for the academy soon. His brother Levin looked him over like he was seeing a stranger for the first time. Their father brought up the sparring win, and Aaron played it humble, calling it nothing special. His brother Kieran, ever the buzzkill, jumped in to downplay the victory, pointing out the opponent's low rank. Karen swooped in with the save, reminding everyone Kieran himself had barely matched that level at a much older age. Their father shut the argument down entirely, calling Aaron a fine young man, comparing him to his own grandfather. Then Levin extended his hand for a handshake, one of those combat handshakes designed to test mana strength. Aaron panicked internally, needing to impress without revealing too much and blowing his entire cover. His father closed his eyes and admitted he had genuinely worried his youngest was going to be a lifelong disappointment. Karen watched the moment with quiet rage while their father praised his youngest for the first time in years. Then their father offered him a reward for getting into the academy, a thing he wanted. Aaron played coy, insisting it was too much to ask for. His father swore a mana oath on the spot, promising to grant it no matter what. Aaron finally dropped his real request. Kieran lost his mind, chasing them down the hallway, screaming about broken tradition. Their father calmly overruled every objection, and the vault door creaked open. Aaron could take one item from the outer section, with no time limit. He walked through the dark room, thinking about how this book was the single most dangerous weapon in this world. Nobody else could ever be allowed to touch it. This entire performance, the training, the family dinner, the fake gratitude, had all been building to this exact moment. He needed to find and destroy the real trading book before anyone else could. And when he finally walked out holding something completely unexpected, his father's face twisted into pure confusion. Aaron was holding a golden statue, some legendary hero, worth well over 1,000 gold coins. His father stared at it, disappointed. His son had broken into a sacred vault just to grab something shiny to flip for cash. Inside, Aaron was celebrating, because his father had absolutely no idea what he had actually come looking for. The truth was far darker than any of them realized. Moments earlier, inside that vault, Aaron had been having a full mental breakdown. He tore through shelves, pushed books aside, and the book of dimensional transactions simply was not there. Either it had been moved sometime in the last 17 years, or someone else was actively using it right now. He grabbed the golden statue as a fallback, and the second his fingers touched it, notifications exploded across his vision. His old merchant privileges from his past life had somehow carried over. A VIP account, right there in front of him, impossible, but real. Maxed out skills, zero commission fees, price manipulation, automatic discounts. He had God mode enabled for trading, and his entire revenge plan just got turbocharged. Back in the present, he wasted no time flipping the golden statue for coin. The exchange tried to lowball him at a fraction of its real worth, and he activated his skill to expose the theft instantly. Deal closed, money flowing, and Aaron was learning that trading from bed was somehow easier than he ever imagined in his last life. He turned his attention back to mana stones, targeting Hearthstone again, this time demanding the old discounted price he had already earned once before. Hearthstone recognized him instantly and started sweating. Since business had been dead for days and cheap sales beat no sales at all, he caved, offering a bulk deal, and Aaron accepted without hesitation. He immediately relisted everything for resale at a steep markup, walking away with pure profit. When Hearthstone discovered the listings, he nearly had a stroke. Furious that his own discount had just been weaponized against him, the two of them went back and forth in a chat war. Aaron unbothered, Hearthstone unraveling. Eventually a deal was struck at market price, and Aaron immediately undercut it again anyway. As a VIP, his commission fees were basically non-existent, letting him undercut literally everyone and still profit. He dropped medium stone prices even lower, and the system chimed with a level up. Access to level 1 trading unlocked, something that had taken a full year in his past life. Achieved this time in just 8 days. With the new level came new abilities, and the first one was absolutely broken. A skill that let him absorb information and techniques at lightning speed. Then a mysterious message appeared from someone claiming divine indulgence, asking to name a price for a sword. Aaron dismissed it as a scam, along with everyone else in the chat. Another notification hit. His absorption skill had maxed itself out on its own. Side effects reduced, speed boosted dramatically. He had no idea why everything was accelerating this fast, but he was not about to complain. The exchange center sent him 3 welcome coupons for hitting level 1, and at first, he assumed they were garbage. Then he actually read them, and his jaw hit the floor. Years of internal energy, hundreds of coins, and something called maximum body and sword stealth. His absorption skill devoured all 3 coupons instantly, and the results were staggering. The martial arts from the system ran on internal energy instead of mana, and somehow it was fully compatible with his existing mana core. He just needed to open his meridians, and he would be cooking with gas. Aaron realized with total clarity that having a trading system in this world was simply too broken. To be fair, as long as he had coins, he could buy his way into becoming unstoppable. He decided to spend his fresh coins on a shopping spree, starting with a visit to a spatial merchant operating out of a dramatic cave. The merchant greeted him with an over-the-top sales pitch, and Aaron cut straight to the martial arts inventory. He recognized the entire con instantly. This man specifically targeted desperate, low-level buyers who would throw every coin they had at anything sounding legendary. The triple sword technique, sold as infinite and godlike, was in reality just 3 basic moves: stab, cut, block. Aaron called out the scam directly, and the merchant, completely shameless, doubled down and offered personal advice for even more coins. Playing along, Aaron agreed, letting the merchant believe he had landed a gullible buyer. Behind the scenes, that intel got fed straight into a much bigger scheme, one aimed at exposing a fugitive hiding among the sect leaders of another world. 200 coins dropped into his account as a reward, and Aaron nearly choked on his own drink at the sheer speed of it. But the merchant he had just exposed was never the real target. The real target was a man named Sukin, a first-class scroll seller and the person Aaron blamed for destroying his entire family in his past life. 𝗥𝗲𝗏 had once sold him the exact cursed item that started the chain reaction leading to his family's total collapse. Aaron's eyes went ice cold just thinking about it. He opened a new chat and made contact, playing the role of a gullible new customer to perfection. 𝗥𝗏 fell for it instantly, offering an overpriced scroll at more than double its market value. Aaron bought it anyway, no complaints, playing the long game, taking a small loss now to build trust before the real payback. Believing he had scored a rich sucker, 𝗥𝗏 extended a friendship offer, and Aaron accepted with a smile that did not reach his eyes. While plotting his revenge, his maid 𝗥𝗏 walked in and froze, sensing the murderous energy leaking off him without warning. She reminded him he had missed morning training, and mentioned something about his brother Kieran earlier that day. Suddenly, the memory came flooding back. That morning, Kieran had shown up at the training ground, accusing Aaron of thinking he was better than everyone else. The argument escalated fast, Kieran swinging without warning, testing whether Aaron's newfound confidence was actually backed by anything real. Aaron dodged, genuinely confused by how touchy his older brother had suddenly become. Then Kieran mocked him for being praised once by their father, and Aaron's hand ignited with flame on instinct. The strike sent Kieran flying backward, completely stunned that his weak little brother possessed this kind of power. Furious, Kieran activated an advanced aura technique, one reserved for high-ranking knights. Aaron panicked internally, forced to fully commit. Since maintaining his weak act any longer risked serious injury, he struck back with everything he had, launching his brother clean into the air. Kieran hit the ground demanding answers, insisting this power must have come from the secret vault. And that is when it clicked for Aaron. His brother had no idea. The vault was split into an outer and inner section. More importantly, their father likely had no idea the dimensional transaction book even existed. If it had never been found in this timeline, it was either hidden deep in the inner vault, or it simply did not exist here at all. Cracking the inner vault was going to be far harder than the outer one, but he needed to figure it out fast. Back in the present, 𝗥𝗏 snapped him out of the memory, concerned by his blank stare. He brushed it off, thanked her, and sent her off to rest, already thinking about how he needed access to that inner vault before leaving for the academy. Meanwhile, in Kieran's room, the young man was absolutely losing it, refusing to accept the loss to his so-called trash brother. His sister Darren watched him spiral, noting quietly that her brother had just been thoroughly demolished. Kieran was certain Aaron was hiding something, that this whole act of weakness was a carefully built lie. Darren agreed to dig into it herself and find out exactly what he was planning. Meanwhile, across the merchant world, an entire alliance was cursing Aaron's name, blaming him for tanking their business. Back in his room, stuffed with dinner, Aaron got hit with a wave of system notifications. Mana stone prices were crashing far faster than expected. He had dumped his prices deliberately, but the market panic he triggered was moving quicker than planned. He was not sweating it, though. His inventory sat at 34 maxed items and a small fortune in coin. He decided to keep flipping the medium stones while he worked toward a higher trading rank. A new seller named Jinsang showed up with an entire premium catalog, and Aaron spotted immediately this was not some cheap street operation. This sect had influence that made the earlier scam merchants look like lemonade stands. Later that day, 𝗥𝗏 arrived early with the requested scroll. Thrilled to have completed the order so fast, Aaron spun a story about a wealthy client obsessed with rare martial arts, and 𝗥𝗏, completely oblivious, offered to fetch something even more valuable. An advance payment of 200 coins dropped into Aaron's account, sealing a 5-day deal that 𝗥𝗏 had no idea would end his career. Meanwhile, Aaron quietly confirmed with Jinsang that stealing a unique skill from his organization would end in disaster for the thief. Perfect. Step 1 of the trap was complete. Now, he just needed to find 1,000 coins to close the loop. Later that evening, sitting outside a quiet building, he heard the sharp crack of a slap echo through the courtyard. He froze. That voice belonged to 𝗥𝗏. Darren stood over her, hand raised, demanding to know what secret the maid was hiding. 𝗥𝗏 stayed silent, crying, insisting she was nothing more than a simple servant caring for the young master. Darren raised her hand for another strike, threatening far worse if the truth did not come out. And that is when Aaron walked in, grabbing his sister's wrist mid-swing. He told her calmly, if she had complaints about his maid, she could bring them directly to him. Darren spat manipulative accusations his way, and he simply threw her against a nearby tree without hesitation. She scrambled to her feet, switching tactics instantly, threatening to run to their father, claiming Aaron had struck her himself. Aaron stared her down, calling out her plan before she could even finish forming it. Darren's confidence cracked completely, panicking internally at how he had already seen through her. He turned to check on Giselle, who broke down crying, insisting she did not deserve to be protected like this. His hand clenched into a fist, and he told her plainly, she was one of his people now, and anyone who dared touch his people would answer for it, even the Emperor himself. Days later, Hearthstone sat chain-smoking, desperate to figure out where Aaron kept sourcing endless mana stones. A mysterious stone seller reached out, offering him a way to fight back. Either buy everything Aaron was trying to sell first, or crash the market together. The first option was impossible, so they went with the second, and a full-blown price war ignited. Every day, the price dropped further, and Hearthstone grew increasingly convinced this rival stone seller had a secret plan. What none of them realized was that the mysterious seller crashing the market alongside them was Aaron himself, operating under a second account. Information was everything in trading, and whoever controlled the flow of information controlled the entire market. He had joined the newly formed Merchant Alliance, the literal second. It was founded, feeding them just enough confidence to walk straight into his trap. Hearthstone, blissfully unaware he was the chairman of an alliance, being played like a fiddle, dreamed of hiring a third party to swoop in and buy everything at rock-bottom prices. Aaron, watching it all unfold from the shadows, thought to himself how basic the strategy really was. Buy low, sell high, nothing revolutionary about it at all. Meanwhile, Darren sat alone in her room, replaying the moment Aaron had exposed a business connection she had kept hidden from the entire family. A knock interrupted her spiral, and it was Aaron himself, wanting to talk business. He revealed he already knew about her secret ties to a trading company known for manipulating young nobles behind closed doors. In his past life, that exact company had gotten close to Darren after she inherited power, and used their leverage to control her completely. Darren demanded to know how he had figured it out, and he simply shrugged, saying it was not exactly rocket science. He explained his own position honestly. As the youngest son, he probably would not inherit anything from the family estate. But what about her daughter in a world that offered women almost nothing? Her hands trembled as she admitted the company had approached her first, offering favors she would eventually have to repay. He knew she was lying about the details, but instead of exposing her, he offered something she never expected: a partnership. Hours later, negotiations wrapped, and Darren agreed to help him move mana crystals through her business contacts. Meanwhile, a system window flared to life, revealing 800 coins dropping from a grateful sect he had helped, along with rare tablets worth a fortune. His inventory was overflowing, hundreds of medium mana crystals sitting pretty, and his grin got a little wider every time he checked his balance. That night, at Darren's mansion, a scarred merchant known as 𝗥𝗲𝗶 arrived, and the guards nearly fainted, recognizing his name. This was Aaron in disguise, a full identity swap using a human skin mask, a voice-changing pill, and a stack of concealment scrolls. The company director, Damon, sat down to negotiate, examining a single crystal and questioning its quality. Aaron dropped a massive bag of crystals onto the table with a thud, and demanded 100 gold per piece without blinking. Damon choked, countered lower, and Aaron simply stood up, threatening to walk out entirely. Darren played along flawlessly, backing up his bluff without missing a beat. Damon caved, agreeing to the original price, calling Aaron the most persistent negotiator he had ever met. Then, completely deadpan, Aaron raised the price even higher, demanding 120 gold per crystal instead. Damon's face went pale, but with 300 crystals on the table, and stock that scarce, walking away simply was not an option for him. Halfway through the deal, 30 minutes of disguise were thin, and Aaron's real voice began leaking through. He faked a coughing fit, popped another concealment pill, and barely covered the slip in time. The deal closed, and as they left the mansion, Darren pressed him hard, wanting to know exactly how he knew her family's inner workings so well. He deflected with the story about her brother, mentioning family competition, and casually advised her to get along better with her siblings. That night, sprawled on his bed, Aaron ran the numbers, and the profit margins were looking beautiful. But his mind drifted to what he had told Darren about family, and a quiet sadness settled in. In his past life, his relationships with his siblings had been an absolute disaster. This time around, he was determined to fix things, even if he could never explain the real reason why. Then his thoughts snapped back to business, because he was closing in on revenge against 𝗥𝗲𝗏. A message from the man himself appeared, and Aaron forced himself to wait a few seconds before responding, refusing to look desperate. 𝗥𝗏𝗏 opened with a dramatic sales pitch for a rare technique, claiming it was worth far more than its listed price. Aaron already knew this was another elaborate scam, but he played along, letting the greed build. 𝗥𝗏𝗏 demanded an absurd markup, claiming the initial deposit had already been spent elsewhere. Aaron seethed internally, but calculated the numbers. He was still short a significant sum, and the only way to close the gap fast was through the exchange center he despised. He forced himself to calm down, reminding himself this loss was temporary. 𝗥𝗏𝗏 would pay back 100 times what he was stealing right now. The trade finally went through, and the moment Aaron hit accept, his smile spread wide. The bait had been taken. His account balance dropped into the negative, and instead of panic, he felt nothing but excitement building toward the reveal. On the other end, 𝗥𝗏𝗏 celebrated, thrilled about finessing 4,000 coins out of a total stranger. Aaron sat back, smiling like a villain, wondering how long that happiness would last. Then he dropped 𝗥𝗏𝗏's real name into the chat, exposing the entire fraud operation he had been running behind his employer's back. 𝗥𝗏𝗏 froze completely, panic setting in as Aaron threatened to bring in the librarian as a witness. Cornered, 𝗥𝗏𝗏 confessed everything, his true identity, his stolen goods, all of it. Aaron laid down a set of brutal rules. Obey completely or face exposure to an organization known for punishing thieves with unimaginable cruelty. Terrified, 𝗥𝗏𝗏 agreed to everything, even sending back the original deposit along with hidden fees he had tried to keep for himself. Aaron kept squeezing, demanding more techniques, more coins, watching the man's balance collapse in real time. Eventually, 𝗥𝗏𝗏 was left with almost nothing, sobbing, wondering how someone from such a low starting rank could see through him so completely. Aaron gave him a choice: keep his life, or keep his martial arts, but not both. Broken and desperate, 𝗥𝗏𝗏 surrendered everything. Aaron looked at the pathetic list of techniques he received and could not help but roast the man for how weak they were. But even he felt a flicker of pity watching 𝗥𝗏𝗏's profile update. A man who lost everything. Instead of ending him completely, Aaron offered a twisted mercy: become his obedient puppet and live. Real revenge meant suffering, not a clean death. And Aaron promised to check in regularly to make sure that suffering never stopped. The next morning, Aaron took his new martial arts for a test run through the forest, obliterating trees and boulders with techniques that used to belong to another man entirely. Testing the mystery blade technique, the same legendary skill that once turned his grandfather into a mythical knight. He stood in the middle of the destruction he had caused and realized just how deep this rabbit hole went. If even the greatest knight in the land was technically ranked the same as a thief like 𝗥𝗏𝗏, something about this whole ranking system needed serious reconsideration. He tested 5 techniques back to back, pushing his internal energy alongside his heart's mana, wondering if the two completely different power sources could somehow combine. Focusing deeply, he felt something shift, and his hands began glowing with a strange silver aura he had never seen before. Back at the castle, a panicked servant tracked him down. His father was demanding his presence immediately. He hurried to the office, where his father sat working alongside 𝗥𝗏𝗏, the estate's quiet but dangerous overseer. His father, radiating power at a level most people never even glimpsed, looked up and immediately noticed the training. He questioned why Aaron had hidden this side of himself for so long, and Aaron dropped some vague philosophy about staying hidden until the right moment. The praise did not last long, because his father pivoted straight into a lecture about using the family name recklessly for trade. Aaron admitted his mistake, sweating internally as his father mentioned personally meeting the very merchant he had disguised himself as. Before the conversation ended, his father asked if there was anything he needed before leaving for the academy. Aaron hesitated, then answered honestly, "Just caring is enough." Right after, Koi pulled him aside, curious how his father had uncovered Darren's secret business connections so fast. Aaron played dumb, but internally, he knew someone had talked. Turns out, his father had simply chosen to let Darren learn her lesson the hard way instead of punishing her outright. And things had somehow worked out fine. With that crisis avoided, Aaron pulled up the investment market, furious at how expensive everything was. A single year of internal cultivation cost thousands of coins, a price locked in ages ago by the system itself. He found a sketchy discounted listing, 10 years of cultivation for a fraction of the normal price, and grabbed it without a second thought. Sitting on his bed, he absorbed the entire thing in one violent burst of light and wind, speed running 60 years of progress in a single sitting. When it was over, he checked his status and realized the next milestone required something rarer, a pair of items called yin and yang bugs. He reached out to a seller for information, and the response was unsettling. These were living parasites capable of completely reprogramming someone's personality. Turn an honest person into a liar, or theoretically, fix someone broken beyond repair. The seller issued one crucial warning: never use these on family, because once inside a person's body, the control was permanent, with no way to remove it. Aaron filed that warning away carefully, already thinking of exactly who deserved this particular gift. That night, in the training hall, he found 𝗥𝗲𝗶 grinding away at his sword, pushing his body far past what a normal knight could handle. Aaron praised him, offered him a drink laced with something extremely suspicious, and used an unstoppable puppy dog expression to force him into drinking it anyway. Moments later, deep in the forest, Aaron asked 𝗥𝗲𝗶 to demonstrate his aura, and the knight complied, thinking this was simply childish curiosity. Aaron studied the display closely, comparing its density to his own father's power, and confirmed 𝗥𝗲𝗶, while impressive, posed no real threat. Then, instantly, the friendly mask dropped. Aaron addressed him by his true name, 𝗪𝗏𝗪, exposing him as an imperial spy hiding inside the estate. 𝗥𝗲𝗶 tried to play it off, but Aaron pointed out the obvious tell: if he genuinely had evidence, they would not be alone in this forest right now. Cornered, 𝗥𝗲𝗶 drew his sword and attacked, only for Aaron to vanish and reappear behind him, blade already glowing with aura. The spy's sword shattered on contact. Aaron discarded his own weapon and challenged him to a bare-handed fight instead. One devastating strike later, 𝗥𝗲𝗶 lay in a crater, coughing blood, completely unable to comprehend how someone this young possessed this much raw power. Aaron revealed the truth, that 𝗥𝗲𝗶 had already swallowed one of the yin and yang bugs earlier. That night, hidden inside his drink, panic set in instantly. The parasite now shared every ounce of pain 𝗥𝗲𝗶 felt, and if the paired bug ever died, both host and creature would suffer a slow, agonizing collapse. Under complete control, 𝗥𝗲𝗶 confessed everything. The Empire feared a second legendary hero rising from this bloodline, terrified by the pattern of mythic power appearing generation after generation. Aaron already understood the truth behind his own strength had nothing to do with bloodline, and everything to do with the trading system. But the Empire's paranoia was still a very real and dangerous threat. More importantly, it meant his father's mysterious disappearance years from now might not be some random tragedy at all. It might be the exact reason the entire family fell apart in his past life. Later, back at the estate, Aaron staged the entire scene as a failed rescue attempt, presenting 𝗥𝗲𝗶's supposed corpse to his father as proof of a foiled spy operation. His father praised the effort, and his brother Kiran seethed quietly, humiliated once again by his little brother's growing reputation. In private, 𝗥𝗲𝗶 pulled off his disguise, revealing the mask was crafted from real human skin, and Aaron warned him it could never be recreated if damaged. 𝗥𝗲𝗶, now firmly under control, questioned why Aaron kept his true strength hidden despite being a direct descendant of a legendary hero. Aaron explained simply, there was only so much pressure a chisel could take before the stone shattered entirely. He held up the small bottle containing the 𝗪𝗿𝗁, a quiet reminder that 𝗥𝗲𝗶 now belonged to him completely. That night, his father visited his room unannounced, sitting close, asking how he was really doing. The gesture caught Aaron completely off guard. This level of closeness had never existed between them, not in this life, and never in the last one. His father revealed guard numbers were increasing because of the spy incident, and thanked him sincerely for what he had done. Sitting there, Aaron realized the version of his father he remembered from his past life, cold, distant, absent, simply did not match the man beside him. Now, the disconnect hit him harder than expected, and he swallowed the urge to explain everything, knowing it would only sound insane. He decided quietly he would fix the future himself. No explanations required. The next morning, his father led him back to the vault as a reward, granting him a full hour alone inside the inner section. Reunited with shelves full of familiar treasures, Aaron spotted his grandfather's actual gear, a legendary sword called 𝗪𝗿𝗁, humming with power that even an enhanced aura could not cut through. His inventory was nearly full, and he spent heavily to upgrade its capacity, catching himself before going too reckless with the spending. He searched every corner for the transaction book, desperate, certain it had to be here somewhere. Nothing. Reaching under a low shelf, his fingers closed around something unexpected instead. A strange black egg, heavy and metallic, humming faintly with unknown energy. He shoved it aside as unimportant and kept searching, but the book simply was not in this vault at all. That realization brought a strange kind of relief. If the book did not exist here, he held a total monopoly over the entire trading system in this timeline. His mind drifted to the deeper mystery. How exactly had the bookmark of wishes granted him both a second chance and this monopoly, when it should have only granted one wish? The math simply did not add up, and he filed the question away for later, unable to solve it right now. As he turned to leave, the black egg rolled out from under the shelf again, bumping directly into his foot, despite having no legs at all. This vault had belonged to the greatest spatial merchant to ever exist, so honestly, unexplainable objects tracking him down felt almost normal. He scanned it with his system, and the result came back completely blank, meaning this object originated from a dimension far beyond anything he had encountered. He activated his eye of insight, and the instant he saw the truth behind this egg, his entire expression changed. Whatever this thing actually was, it had just become extremely important. Days later, it was finally time to leave the estate for the Royal Academy. In his past life, this exact departure had been a quiet celebration of good riddance. Whispers, following him out the door. Nobody sad to see him go. This time, the send-off felt entirely different. People genuinely wishing him well, sincerely hoping for his safe return. He waved back with a real smile, quietly proud of how far things had come in just a few short weeks. Karen pulled him aside, ran through an entire checklist of motherly advice, then pressed a small pouch of coins into his hand. He noticed something missing immediately: her ruby pendant, the one she always wore, gone. She had sold it quietly, just to give him extra money for the road. Sitting in the carriage afterward, that realization sat heavy in his chest, far heavier than the item itself should have warranted. He reminded himself the burden Karen carried as acting head of the household should never have fallen on her shoulders in the first place. Shaking off the emotion, he pulled up his system to check on 𝗥𝗲𝗁's forced business arrangement, and the results were disappointing. He renegotiated the contract terms in his own favor without hesitation, watching 𝗥𝗲𝗁's cut shrink even further. Then 𝗥𝗲𝗁 delivered something genuinely useful, a rare technique created by a legendary swordmaster from another world. designed specifically for a woman's body instead of a man's. The book's translation was flawless, the technique perfectly suited for what he had in mind. He walked over and handed it directly to Karen, telling her the reason would make sense once she actually started training with it. Watching her accept the gift with genuine surprise, he thought about how much raw talent she actually possessed, far more than he ever had in his own past life. If she had simply been given the opportunity to grow in his previous timeline, the entire family might never have collapsed the way it did. Before departing completely, he turned back toward the crowd, pointed 2 fingers at his own eyes, then slowly swung them toward Darren, the universal warning to behave herself while he was gone. With that, the carriage finally hit the road. Mid-journey, call came through from Sukin. The beast tamer he had been tracking finally responded. Aaron pulled up the details on the black egg he had recovered from the vault, and the description alone was staggering. This was a 𝗪𝗏𝗁 egg, an unstoppable force of nature that started off weak, then grew to consume metal and cause literal natural disasters. Fiercely loyal to whoever raised it, the seller offering the relevant knowledge, a man named Henry, tried to force him into buying an entire massive collection instead of just the section he needed. Aaron dismantled every excuse, called out the inflated pricing, and finally locked in a fair deal for exactly the information he wanted. Absorbing the knowledge instantly, he learned the creature's growth ceiling was terrifying, starting regional, but capable of scaling all the way to planetary levels of destruction with proper training. Hatching it required rare genetic material, and the very first substance it consumed would determine the absolute ceiling of its future power. He consulted Sukin for advice, and the man recommended a specific rare bloodline, dragon blood. Without hesitation, Aaron acquired it immediately and dripped a few drops directly onto the egg, watching it hiss and glow with a deep scarlet light. Not long after, cracks spread across the shell, smoke curled from the surface, and out popped the tiniest, most wide-eyed little creature imaginable. He named the pet Sari, and within moments, the little creature imprinted completely, bonding to his blood for life. The carriage rolled on through mountain passes, Sari growing rapidly, devouring elixirs like candy while Aaron trained beside it. Then he glanced over and found his beloved pet happily munching on an extremely rare and expensive pill he had been carefully saving. He slumped over, quietly devastated, already calculating how much extra hustling this loss would require. That frustration sparked a new idea, a fresh money-making scheme involving internal cultivation gear, flipped for massive profit despite harsh resale restrictions on the exchange. He went on an extended shopping spree, elixirs and supplies stacking up fast, funding both his own growth and his pet's rapid development. By the time the fangs and fur fully came in, Sari had officially graduated from infant to full companion, and Aaron finally stopped burning through elixirs on daily maintenance. As the carriage approached the city of Audio, his companion 𝗥𝗲𝗶, now completely under his control, mentioned he had already left a signal marking their arrival for a contact inside the city. That night, while the crew celebrated at a local tavern, Aaron and 𝗥𝗲𝗶 handled business quietly in the shadows. 𝗥𝗲𝗶 prepared to meet an old contact named Trevor alone, insisting too many familiar faces together would draw unwanted attention. Aaron demanded a full progress report anyway, testing loyalty rather than logic, and 𝗥𝗲𝗶 handed it over without complaint. Using an invisibility scroll layered with a speed enhancement, Aaron became functionally invisible, gliding silently across the rooftops of the sleeping city. From above, he watched 𝗥𝗲𝗶 blend perfectly into the crowd below, professional, unhurried, exactly as trained. Inside a lit-up house, Trevor greeted 𝗥𝗏𝗶 with genuine surprise, and the conversation quickly turned serious. A previous contact named Gilbert was dead, and Trevor's entire demeanor shifted the moment he heard the news. Suspicious of 𝗥𝗏𝗶's sudden appearance so far from his usual post, Trevor tested him hard, watching for any crack in his story. 𝗥𝗏𝗶 held steady, deflecting the pressure with cold, practiced calm, eventually passing every layer of scrutiny. Once alone, one of Trevor's men raised a red flag, questioning why the messenger had died, but the field agent had somehow survived. Trevor dismissed the concern instantly, insisting 𝗪𝗏𝗻𝗁 valued his family above all else, and would never betray them. Aaron, listening from the rooftop, understood exactly how deep 𝗪𝗏𝗻's personal loyalties actually ran, and made a mental note to keep watching closely. Making his way back through the city, invisibility fading, Aaron heard shouting erupt from a nearby street. His own men, drunk and rowdy, had gotten tangled in a brawl with knights loyal to a rival noble house. The moment he heard the family name 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗪 invoked, his blood ran cold. This fight involved 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗪. A second captain arrived to break up the chaos, and the instant Aaron saw the man's face, his entire body locked up in pure fight or flight. Memories of his past life flooded back instantly: torture, blood, a room he could never fully escape. And this exact man had orchestrated all of it. His first instinct was murder, right there in the street, but he caught himself. Why give the man an easy way out, when slow, deliberate suffering would taste so much sweeter later? The captain scolded the soldiers responsible, and Aaron stepped forward calmly, revealing his full name and family status. Everyone froze. This situation had just escalated dramatically in scope. Marquis Albert himself jumped in, arrogant and dismissive, insisting his family outranked the entire 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗪 bloodline entirely. Aaron simply smiled, called out the lie, and demanded a fair account from witnesses on both sides. The truth came out clean. Albert's men had started the disrespect first, mocking the family's legacy directly. Aaron praised his own knight for defending their honor, then pulled back his cloak to reveal the family crest underneath. Both Albert and the captain froze completely, staring at proof. They were dealing with a house far too powerful to bully. The captain, sharp enough to sense disaster, turned on his own men and beat them down himself, publicly reframing the entire conflict as a low-level squabble rather than a fight between noble houses. Aaron respected the tactical retreat, quietly filing away just how clever this particular subordinate really was. Albert stormed off in humiliated fury, and Aaron delivered one final blow, sarcastically accepting an apology that had never actually been offered. The Marquis froze mid-step, rage boiling visibly across his face, utterly powerless to respond. The next day, Albert grumbled through breakfast, demanding to know why his own captain had backed down so easily the night before. The captain explained the retreat had been necessary. Pushing further risked open conflict with the family still widely feared across the realm. Albert grudgingly accepted the logic, but privately swore he would make Aaron pay for the humiliation. Meanwhile, the 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗪 convoy had already left at dawn, wanting no further contact with the man he despised most in either lifetime. That night, deep in Albert's estate, a window creaked open silently. The Marquis slept soundly, sprawled across his bed, completely unaware his room was no longer empty. A hand clamped over his mouth, and his eyes snapped open to find Aaron looming over him in the dark. Aaron pressed a finger to his lips, savoring the moment he had been fantasizing about since the day he first woke up in the past. In his previous life, this exact man had destroyed everything the 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗪 family had ever built, driven by nothing but pure, petty jealousy over a name. Looking down at this pathetic and changed version of his old tormentor, Aaron confirmed one simple truth to himself: some people never actually deserve mercy. Albert grabbed his wrist, terrified, and Aaron released his mouth just long enough for him to try screaming for help. Nothing came out. A silent scroll had sealed the entire room. The moment he stepped inside, panic set in fully as Aaron explained, almost politely, that specific pressure points could block a person's voice entirely. Albert made a desperate scramble for the door, and Aaron closed the distance instantly, driving a knee into his stomach and dropping him to the floor. A precise series of strikes rendered him completely immobile, frozen like he was trapped in quicksand. Aaron dragged him to a desk, restored partial movement, and demanded he pick up a pen and write a very specific letter. Albert refused, certain death was coming regardless of cooperation. Aaron's sword flashed, and both of Albert's hands hit the floor. Screaming, sobbing, and finally broken, Albert grabbed the pen with his one remaining working hand and began writing exactly what he was told. With shaking, tear-blurred vision, he clung to the desperate hope that his captain would notice something was wrong before it was too late. Nothing came. The letter finished, Aaron restored his voice one last time, watching curiosity flicker across the Marquis's face at his own captor's calm confidence. Albert screamed for help immediately, and Aaron simply tilted his head, unbothered, revealing the silent scroll meant not one single sound had ever left this room. The full horror of the setup finally landed. This letter had been written under a promise of survival that was never real. Aaron told him plainly. He understood how hard this was to accept. Losing to the family he had spent years trying to destroy. Albert begged, offered wealth, offered anything, desperately clinging to Aaron's leg for mercy. Aaron looked down at him with pure, cold finality, and delivered the only truth that mattered. You should not have killed me. The blade came down. A vial of corrosive liquid finished the job cleanly, dissolving every trace of evidence, leaving nothing behind but a forged letter claiming Albert had simply run away. Aaron pocketed a few remaining valuables, activated a stack of concealment scrolls, and vanished from the estate without a single trace. The following morning, riding back in his carriage, staring out the window, Aaron expected to feel triumphant. Instead, something felt hollow, disoriented, far from the victory he had imagined for so many years. He second-guessed the timing briefly, wondering if patience would have made it feel more satisfying, then dismissed the thought entirely. That moment had been perfect, and chances like that did not come around twice. His mind drifted back to his past life, and the truth he had been avoiding finally surfaced completely. Albert's petty jealousy had never truly been the reason his family fell apart. The real catastrophe, the disappearance of his own father, was still waiting somewhere out there in the timeline, completely unresolved. He slapped his own cheek hard, snapping himself fully back into focus. One threat down, and a much larger, much more dangerous mystery still sitting ahead of him. The academy was waiting, new rivals were waiting, and somewhere in the shadows, the true cause of his family's downfall was still moving pieces on a board he had barely begun to understand. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of everything settle for just a moment. Every scam he had run, every enemy he had crushed, every ally he had quietly manipulated, all of it had been building toward this exact turning point. The weak, useless boy nobody once believed in was gone completely, replaced by someone who controlled markets, commanded loyalty through fear, and executed revenge with terrifying precision. But real power, he realized, was never just about strength on the battlefield. It was about seeing 3 moves ahead while everyone else was still catching up to the first one. Somewhere out there, his father's disappearance was still ticking down toward a fixed point in time. And this time, Aaron refused to let history repeat itself blindly. He had the system, the coins, the techniques, and most importantly, the memories of exactly how badly things could go wrong. The road to the academy stretched out ahead, and beyond it, an entire empire that had no idea what kind of monster it had just made an enemy of. His pet Sari curled up beside him, quietly loyal, completely unaware of the storm its owner was preparing to unleash on the world. Aaron looked down at the small creature, and for the first time in days, allowed himself a genuine, unguarded smile. Not every part of this new life needed to be calculated. Some parts, he decided, were simply worth enjoying. Karen's gift set carefully preserved in his mind, a reminder of exactly why he was fighting this hard in the first place. It was never really about revenge alone, not anymore. It was about protecting the people who had finally chosen to believe in him, even when he barely believed in himself. Darren, manipulative as she was, had still shown flickers of loyalty when it mattered most. Javis, once an enemy agent, was now bound to his side by something far stronger than simple obedience. Even Azel, a maid nobody else had bothered to protect, now stood firmly under his banner, untouchable. Piece by piece, the family that once fell apart around him was being rebuilt on entirely different foundations. Stronger foundations, guided by someone who already knew exactly which cracks to watch for. The academy would test him in ways the estate never could. New enemies, new alliances, new secrets waiting just beneath the surface. But for the first time in either lifetime, Aaron was not walking into that uncertainty as prey. He was walking in as the one thing nobody in either world had ever expected him to become. A predator wearing the mask of the family's most disappointing son. Weeks later, letters began arriving from the estate, and Aaron read each one carefully in the quiet of his academy quarters. Karen wrote about her first attempts at the technique he had given her, describing a strength she never knew she carried until now. Darren's letter stayed careful and guarded, but between the lines, something had genuinely shifted in how she spoke about her family. Even Kieran grudgingly admitted in a short and stiff note that the estate felt different without its youngest son around. Aaron folded each letter with quiet satisfaction, proof that the future he was building was actually taking shape. Back home, no search party ever came for 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗪𝗏, his forged letter accepted at face value. One more spoiled noble simply running from responsibility. The investigation quietly closed, and life in that region moved on without a second thought. Aaron never once regretted the choice. Some debts, he had decided long ago, could only be repaid in blood. What he carried instead was clarity, the knowledge that his past life's downfall had never truly been about petty enemies like Albert at all. The real threat was still out there, patient, hidden, and far more dangerous than a jealous nobleman could ever be. His father's eventual disappearance loomed somewhere on the horizon, an event he was determined to prevent this time, no matter the cost. Every coin he earned, every technique he stole, every alliance he manipulated, all of it was building toward that single, unmovable goal: protect his family, protect his people, and this time, actually be there when it mattered most. 𝗪𝗏 grew stronger by the week, no longer the tiny, helpless creature from the vault, but a companion capable of matching his own rising power. Together, they trained in the quiet hours before dawn, preparing for whatever the academy, and the empire beyond it, had waiting for them. Sukin remained firmly under his control, feeding useful information from the shadows in exchange for a life he no longer took for granted. 𝗥𝗲𝗶, bound by loyalty forged through fear and grudging respect, watched his back at every turn, a silent guardian nobody else even knew existed. Piece by piece, Aaron had assembled something his past life never had, a network built entirely on his own terms. And unlike before, nobody controlled the strings but him. Late one evening, staring out over the academy grounds, Aaron thought back to the boy he used to be. Weak, mocked, and utterly forgotten by everyone who should have loved him. That boy was gone now, buried alongside a life that had ended in blood and betrayal. In his place stood someone entirely different, someone who understood exactly how fragile power truly was, and exactly how ruthlessly it needed to be protected. He thought of his father, still healthy, still present, still completely unaware of the shadow slowly closing in around their family. Aaron promised himself quietly, this time, that shadow would never get the chance to strike. He would see it coming from 100 steps away, and he would be ready long before it ever arrived. The weight of that promise settled over him, heavy, but familiar. The same determination that had carried him through every scheme, every fight, every quiet act of revenge so far. This was never just about becoming powerful for its own sake. It was about making sure nobody he cared about ever had to suffer the way he once did. Karen's sacrifice, Azel's loyalty, even Darren's cautious trust, all of it fueled something deeper than simple ambition. It fueled a promise, one he intended to keep no matter what stood in his way. The academy stretched out before him, filled with rivals who had no idea what kind of storm had just walked through their gates. Somewhere in the distant future, an empire that feared his bloodline was still watching, still calculating, still waiting for the right moment to strike. But Aaron was no longer the boy who waited helplessly for disaster to arrive. He was the one setting the terms now, the one 3 steps ahead, the one who had already lived through the worst outcome once, and refused to let it happen again. Every enemy he had crushed so far had underestimated him for the exact same reason, judging him by a reputation that no longer applied. That mistake, he knew, would keep working in his favor for as long as the world refused to look closer, and by the time they finally understood exactly who they were dealing with, it would already be far too late to stop him. Sari stirred beside him, sensing the shift in his thoughts, nuzzling against his hand for comfort. Aaron smiled softly, scratching behind the creature's ears, grateful for at least one bond in this new life that required no calculation at all. Some things, he was slowly learning, were simply meant to be enjoyed without an ulterior motive attached. The road ahead would still demand ruthlessness, calculation, and no small amount of sacrifice. But for the first time since waking up in the past, Aaron felt something close to genuine peace settle over him. Not because the danger was gone, it clearly was not, but because he finally had people worth protecting, and a plan solid enough to actually protect them. The estate he left behind was stronger now, its people more united, its future no longer written in the same tragic ink as before. Whatever the empire was planning, whatever secret still lingered in that unexplored inner vault, whatever mysteries remained about the bookmark that started it all, Aaron would face them one at a time, patiently, ruthlessly, and always several steps ahead of anyone who dared to underestimate him again. Because the version of himself that once died alone, betrayed, and forgotten, no longer existed. In his place stood someone who had turned every scar from his past life into a weapon for this one, and every single person who had wronged him in either lifetime was slowly learning that lesson the hard way. Albert learned it in silence, in the dark, at the edge of a blade he never saw coming. Sukin learned it through fear, groveling for a mercy he barely deserved. Hearthstone learned it through humiliation, watching his own market collapse under a rival he never even suspected. And soon, whoever stood behind his father's future disappearance would learn it too. Aaron intended to make absolutely certain of that. The academy gates loomed ahead, but for the first time, they did not feel like the beginning of another lonely chapter. They felt like the next battlefield in a war he had already started winning. Somewhere behind him, back at the estate, Karen trained under the sword technique he had given her, growing stronger by the day. Darren, slowly, cautiously, began choosing loyalty over manipulation, one careful step at a time. Even Kieran, in his own stubborn way, had started watching his younger brother with something closer to respect than resentment. The family that had once shattered completely was being rebuilt, brick by brick, on a foundation strong enough to survive whatever came next. And Aaron, standing at the edge of a future he was actively rewriting with every decision, finally allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in either lifetime until now. Hope, not the naive kind that ignored danger, but the earned kind, built on preparation, sacrifice, and a willingness to do whatever it took to protect what mattered. He thought back to that very first moment in the training ground, the shocked faces, the disbelief, the whispers questioning how any of it was possible. Now, he understood the answer completely. It was possible because he had refused to let his past define his future a second time. Every skill he stole, every enemy he outsmarted, every quiet act of protection for the people around him, had all led here, to a boy once dismissed as worthless, now standing as the single greatest threat his enemies never saw coming. The Empire feared a second legendary hero rising from his bloodline. What they never anticipated was a merchant, a strategist, and an executioner, all wrapped inside the same quiet, unassuming face. Aaron closed his eyes, letting the momentum of everything he had built settle firmly into place. Revenge had been the spark that started this journey, but somewhere along the way, it had grown into something far more meaningful. Protection, loyalty, and a family finally worth fighting for. That was the real victory, more valuable than any coin, any technique, or any title the Empire could ever offer. As the carriage rolled through the academy gates, Aaron looked back one final time toward the road leading home. Somewhere out there, his family carried on, stronger, safer, and finally, united under a purpose they did not even fully understand yet. He turned forward again, facing whatever challenges the academy had waiting inside its walls. Whatever came next, rivals, secrets, or the Empire's growing suspicion. He would meet it with the same cold precision that had carried him this far, because this time, failure was never an option he was willing to accept. The weak, forgotten boy from his past life was gone for good, replaced by someone who had turned every scar into strength. And as the gates closed behind him, sealing this chapter of his journey, one truth stood clearer than anything else. The boy nobody ever believed in had finally become the one thing his entire world could never ignore again. A legend rewritten from the ashes of his own worst life, standing tall and ready for whatever came next.